When I think God gave no answer, God said no. He listens to every plea I offer. Love sometimes says no. Moses spied the land of promise. God said no. A greater prophet must do this service. Love sometimes says no. Gideon raised a mighty army. God said no. To show God's power it was too many. Love sometimes says no. David prayed and cried with fervor. God said no. His baby boy like Christ must suffer. Love sometimes says no. David wanted to build God a temple. God said no. Your royal son must raise its lintel. Love sometimes says no. Poor Elijah prayed, just end me. God said no. God had more plans to show his glory. Love sometimes says no. Greedy crowds sought bread with leaven. God said no. Christ came to give them bread from heaven. Love sometimes says no. James and John sought seats of honor. God said no. Those places are set aside for others. Love sometimes says no. Christ rebuked his sons of thunder. God said no. Their call for vengeance was a blunder. Love sometimes says no. Like a dog, she begged for her daughter. God said no. Her faith still pressed for another answer. Love sometimes says no. Father, spare me from this passion. God said no. Your death will earn their full salvation. Love sometimes says no. Paul would preach in Asia Minor. God said no. Macedonia needs the Spirit's fire. Love sometimes says no. Thrice Paul asked to have his thorn extracted. God said no. In weakness is my power perfected. Love sometimes says no. Saints in faith pray much, but often God says no. Their pride to break, their hearts to soften. Love sometimes says no. Don't lose hope when you discover God said no. His plans for you are so much greater. Love sometimes says no. While I may not understand why God says no, his wisdom lies behind his reply. Love sometimes says no. I know my captain has his reasons. God said no. To any answer I say amen. Love sometimes says no. And don't you forget it.